And we're live. Good afternoon. Hello, everybody. I hope you are all well on this fine and sunny afternoon. It is very sunny. I should really be outside. Let's just say I wish that I could live stream from outside, but I can't. Never mind. So today I'm talking about DIY lighting hacks and things that you can do indoors to kind of maybe mix up your still life and portraiture a little bit. Before I forget, anyone who's not a subscriber, I doubt that anyone is not a subscriber anymore, but if you're not, then do press the subscribe button, please, and then also the little bell icon so that you know when we are going live. And what else? Coffee Fund. Yes, don't forget that you can contribute to the Coffee Fund. It's a very important thing in our little community here, using the super chat icon or the PayPal me link. Yay, by the skin. I'm so glad so many people that normally just miss the beginning are here bright and early. Well done. Do I need to speak louder? Oh, I've been fiddling about with my mic settings. Let me just, bear with me a moment. Let me just put it up a bit. I'm going to be really loud now. Hope you don't mind. Yes, I think it's fine. I'm going to be a little bit louder than I was before. Hopefully I won't have to talk at the top of my voice. Gosh, the last time on Tuesday, had the digging up the road going on and the neighbours shouting outside the window, and it was so hot that I thought my computer was going to just spontaneously combust. I don't have that going on today, so hopefully this will be quite a straightforward stream. Fingers crossed. At some point today we may have Simon Stafford tag in as well, and possibly answer some of the comment questions while I'm going along, because sometimes I don't keep an eye on the comments and people ask questions and I miss them. So if I do that, I'm very sorry. Someone also said I look too shiny. I'm sorry. I shine. What can I say? No, honestly, there's no way for me to fiddle about with these lights anymore. I think I've done it until I cannot. So if I'm too shiny for you, pop on some sunglasses while you're watching the live stream and maybe that will solve it. All right. And if anyone has any suggestions, apart from the obvious of dimming the lights, let me know. No, it wasn't you, Brian. It was my mic settings. I don't know why I had it turned down. Maybe I thought it was too loud, but I will not have to shout so much now. So natural light is going to be the first point of today. And then I'm going to talk about flash and artificial light and stuff. But I wanted to talk about natural light first because it's something that I often use. In fact, if you've been following the streams for any length of time, you'll know that I do an awful lot of taking pictures of books for my Instagram, Bookstagram as we call it. And I tend to use natural light most of the time. It's just the most flattering. But there are difficulties to doing that, particularly in the winter or when you're shooting at night. So I also wanted to talk about low-key and high-key shots and why you might want to do one or the other. The first and most obvious thing when shooting natural light is having a big window. If you don't have a big window, or you can't shoot next to the window, obviously you could shoot outdoors in your garden or something like that, but when you've got a really bright sunny day like today, the light is so harsh that sometimes you get these really, really dark shadows, and then sometimes you also blow out your highlights. So obviously keeping an eye on the histogram helps. For those of you that don't know how to look at your histogram, if you've got one of these, one of these Z's cameras, you can look at the histogram while you're shooting. It's just one of the display options. Let me get so my histogram is actually already displayed, but you just need to press the display button, this one, to get up your live histogram. If you don't have a Z camera, then you do have to look at your histogram after you've taken the photo. And usually you do that by, sorry, all my cameras have got things on them. Let me just, look, this one's got a flash on it. Let me take that off for a second. So if you've got one of these cameras, a DSLR, then you have to look at your histogram after the fact by pressing the playback button and then usually twiddling your up and down buttons like this. If you don't have it set up to show your histogram, then you probably just need to go to your playback display options, which is in the playback menu, and make sure that you've got that little overview ticked there so that you can do that. So histogram is quite important, particularly when shooting in bright daylight and you can't really see the screen on the back to tell whether or not you've clipped your highlights or what you've done. So do use the histogram. I'll also talk about other reasons why you might want to use the histogram in a moment. Oh, thank you, Terry. Everyone give Terry a nice clap for, yes, I will have an iced oat milk flat white. Thank you very much. All right, so that's when you're shooting outdoors. Now, you can use a few natural things as reflectors and diffusers. That's the most important thing when you're out and about, or if you're shooting with a big bright window. I showed you some portraits when I did the how to use your reflector. Do you remember this thing? I'm going to pull it out now and it will attack me. Oh, I'm going to try and make it not attack me. This thing is a 5-in-1 diffuser reflector. And it has a silver side. That's a white side, actually. It has a gold side there. And then you unzip it and you take it apart, and then you've got silver side and other sides. I'm just going to discreetly put that by my feet. So you can use something like that if you've got it. But if you don't, you can also use, it's going to be like an episode of Blue Peter. For those of you that don't know what that is, Google it. For those of you that do know what it is, yeah, I'm going to very much embrace my inner Blue Peter presenter today. Tinfoil. Tinfoil is a fantastic reflector. Look, I think it's even probably diffusing the light nicely. I probably look even shinier now. But you can use this as a reflector. I'm going to give you another use for tinfoil a little bit later. But when you're just trying to fill in shadows, when you've got your subject and you've got a very harsh shadow on one side or the other, you can literally bounce natural light off a sheet of tinfoil. Do ask permission from your adult before using anything in the kitchen. Thank you so much, Andre and Ian. That is very, very kind. Oh, there's a histogram in live view. I knew that. I have a D850. I just didn't think about putting it on. But yes, thank you, Colin. D810, D850. Probably also D500, I would think. It's all around the same generation, maybe D5 and D780. So we've got our histogram in live view, just not through the viewfinder. Yeah, exactly. Sticky back plastic. Here's one I made earlier. I don't have much here. Here's one I made earlier. My attempt of something I'm going to talk about later fell apart after a while. But yes, it's very much a arts and crafts project today. So this is a very, very useful. I'm trying not to crackle it too much because I've turned the volume up on the mic now. But this is a very useful diffuser. So if you don't have one of those fancy big flip out diffusers, not a problem. Just use some tin foil. That is incredibly handy if you're doing portraiture next to a big window, or if you're doing outside and you just need that little bit of extra lift of the shadows, because sunlight, as we all know, can create some very, very harsh shadows on people's faces. Now, if you are using a light source or a flash, or if you're using a big window and you don't have, let's say, semi-transparent blinds. We have blockout blinds in our house, so I can never use those as a diffuser. So I usually have to use other things. White sheets are very useful, but also another one to ask your grown-up for is some baking parchment. You can actually, now this messes with the white balance, so please bear in mind that you will have to do a manual white balance setting if you use it. But you can actually use baking parchment as a diffuser, and I will show you an example of me having done that in a moment. So you could use that as a diffuser, white sheet, semi-transparent blind, basically any kind of fabric. Linen cloth works as well, although it does block out quite a lot of light. But any of those things are quite good for diffusing the light. So if you are using a window and you've got the sun coming in very harsh on one side, you can actually just tape up the light source with a diffuser. Now, another use for a big window is a natural light box. I thought I'd show you some pictures. A lot of people are buying these light boxes these days online, which is fair enough. It works for some things, doesn't for others. We have one in the shop that we use for product photography. Actually, we've got two, a very, very big one, and then we've got a sort of normal sized one, which sometimes if someone asks us for pictures of something online, then we try and just run downstairs, put it in the light box and take some pictures. It's fantastic, but it needs to be hooked up to the mains. it can be a little bit of a faff. So if you were trying to take something and you want to get a kind of light box effect where you see through it, you can tape it to your window. And it's actually quite a lot of fun finding things that have these incredible textures when you stick them on the window with or without baking parchment diffuser, depending on what you're taking a picture of. Polystyrene sheet, white foam board, all of that is excellent. Thank you, Malcolm. That's very kind. Oh gosh, I'm going to have 3 oat milk flat. Well, no, I'm not going to have 3. One for me, one for Fatini, who will be watching on the other side and putting links and things whenever I say we're going to put a link somewhere. She's the magic person that actually does that for me. And the poor guys who are in the shop slaving away over hot computers today while they're digging up the road outside the shop as well. Coffees for all them as well, so thank you. All right, I wanted to show you my homemade light box. It's not actually a homemade light box. This was me using the window as a light box and using natural light. And I'm going to show you this once I've flipped the screen over. Ta-da! All right, so it's actually quite amazing what one can do when one is actually just sticking things on the window or holding it up to the window or whatever you might. I actually took a ton of shots, but these were the most interesting ones. So these are the ones I kept. This was with the Z6. I get a lot of mileage out of my tulips. When I buy them, I use them down to the very last second until they're just no longer any good. I had another shot, but I don't seem to have it loaded into my little display here. Another thing which is quite interesting to take pictures of is leaves. Now, I didn't have any sort of really transparent leaves, but I did have these incredibly gnarly looking leaves, which I taped to the window, and I just wanted these interesting kind of rivulets. They're actually obviously the veins of the leaf, but I wanted them highlighted. Again, I took a few shots. This is just one that I happened to grab straight out of the camera. And then talking about shooting outside, this is a book plonked in a bush, quite literally. Obviously, for Bookstagram, this is fantastic. This may not be a shot that excites you very much as a photographer, but even lighting in semi-shade with no editing at all is very, very handy if you are an Instagram photographer, which I am. So this is just natural light box and what you can do if you quite literally tape stuff to the window using baking parchment or not using it as a diffuser, and then also no diffuser but just in shaded light outside, the kind of thing that you can get. I have loads of sample shots. I've actually been going through the drive and I have some shots that are perfect examples from all of you of things that I wanted to show you, examples that I wanted to show you. Right, keep an eye on the comments here. Can't open a Tetra Pak juice pack. Interesting, yeah, because of the aluminium kind of the foil side, I guess, on the inside. Nick on School has a YouTube video on light boxes made out of Amazon boxes. Yes, I don't actually have that link open. I have something different, but I wanted to talk about that as well, Thaddeus. That's very helpful. So natural light box, window, natural lighting, using diffusers, reflectors, etc. Now let's just talk a little bit about high key, low key, still life and what that means. A lot of you will probably know, but I wanted to show you some examples. High key, and it's a term that gets used quite a lot. In fact, if you've got a little camera that has any of the special effects modes from Nikon, like the D5000 or 3000 series, they actually have a high key and a low key mode built into them. So you can pre-select that before you start shooting. But if you are actually just going to take some shots and you want to know the difference between high key and low key, these things are terms that we kind of bandy around and don't necessarily explain very well. So high key tends to mean that everything is white or very light in color. Quite often you will have slightly overexposed highlights, but you can get away with it because that's kind of the whole point in high key. It's to make everything look very clean and bright. Whereas low key generally means underexposed. It means a little bit dark. I'm going to show you some examples of a fantastic photographer who does all of her shots are very, very low key. But I'm also going to show you some of your own examples of high key and low key. So without any further explaining, let me do that now. So let me switch over. Oof, there we go. I'm sorry you're late, David. It's okay. All right, so here's some low key examples. I am full disclosure, I think I may have credited 1 or 2 of these photos to the wrong people, because after I downloaded them, I realized I didn't actually pay attention to who these were. So I think this one's by Brian. Brian can correct me if I'm wrong. This is a low-key shot. It's very, shadows are very dark. The tones are very kind of desaturated. Now, don't get the impression that it has to be black and white to be low-key. Here is another black and white low-key shot. Again, the jug is white, but everything else is dark. The background is completely black. That tends to be the case. This is a shot I showed you from the SBR1C1 stream the other day. As I mentioned, I like flowers to be kind of low key. I like those black backgrounds. And obviously I used flash to illuminate the subject here, but you don't necessarily have to. Ron sent me this lovely photo and uploaded it to the drive, except I flicked off it. There we go. And it's just the window light coming onto the dresser and hitting this ballerina. And it's a lovely low key shot because the focus goes exactly where the light falls, which is fantastic. I believe this is Steve. Steve, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think this is your shot. And this is another low-key shot. So just because it's low-key doesn't mean it doesn't have to have a source of brightness in it. But generally, the source of brightness is only going to be a small portion of the frame. And in low-key shots, everything else is going to be fairly dark. Now let's have a look at some high-key shots, if I can find them. Here we go. Again, I hope this is Brian's shot. I think it is. This is a high key shot. I'm guessing shot with high speed sync flash. And everything is nice and light and bright, and it's got a white background. This is by our very own Fatini. I wanted to do a shot very similar to this actually, but I just was very unprepared. So I didn't, and then I saw this and thought, fantastic. So this is high key. Everything is white and clean, and you just get those little pops of color. So it's nice and bright. This is a lovely one by Joy Whitehead. Again, this I would call a high key shot because the majority of the frame is very, very light. And then this I'm pretty sure is also Steve. Nice high key orchids, very, very nice and bright. I mentioned I like low key orchids, and in fact I found a folder full of low key orchid shots, which someone will tell me who it was that they were from, but there were so many I couldn't choose. And then Eve's also has a couple here. I've got, and now interestingly enough, Eve's did these little heart-shaped flowers that I don't know the name of. I'm no botanist, but he did a high-key version and a low-key version. The low-key version had a completely black background, and this had a completely white background. But I picked this as an example just because I like the clean look of it. And then again, with the dandelion fronds and the little sort of dewdrops here, this is all very high-key. This is lovely stuff. So you've got the two different kind of tonal differences and what you can... Maybe it gives you a bit of inspiration as to what you can do. The person that I wanted to show you the website of, I'm just going to check what that says. It is, yes, Brian says the glass is mine. Good. I'm glad. Some of you who are Nikon owner subscribers will have maybe attended the wonderful Donna Cruz's Nikon owner meeting last week. Lovely, lovely lady, originally hailing from South Africa, but now living in the countryside. And she, whenever I see photos of food like this, I know that they are her shots because she has a very distinctive style. She has this kind of ability to make every type of food look amazing. All of this food is real, she said. She made a point to say, look, it's all real. Sometimes ice cream does melt during a shoot. But it just gives you an idea of super low-key shots and what you can do. So, for example, these, I'm guessing these are persimmons by the looks of things, on this black background, lots of vignetting, very dark background, one light source coming in, but otherwise that's all very low-key. Even, I mean, I would even call something like this low-key. Even this, all of that stuff I would. If you want to just salivate for about 20 minutes, half an hour, go to Donna Cruz's website and just have a little look at all the amazing food that she takes pictures of. She is a food photographer that does mainly photography for books and recipe books and things like that, but also her social media is worth following. But you can just see everything has these really lovely dark shadows. The main kind of highlight is on the one subject in the frame, and everything else is quite dark and subdued around it. For anyone that didn't attend that class and is a Nikon owner subscriber, it's definitely worth getting in touch with Nikon owner to see if they will let you access it afterwards. It was a wonderful course. Donna also does courses with Nikon School, so I'm sure that she will do some of those as well. But like even simple things, simple food and complicated food, and you know, even like a block of cheese and some figs, very, very low key, lit very cleverly, usually with 1 or 2 light sources. She is an advocate of using a big window and then just using a little rotor light as a kind of fill light. And her setup was quite fascinating. I'm going to talk about backgrounds and stuff as well momentarily, but hopefully this gives you a little bit of inspiration. Let me switch back over to me now, of things that you can achieve both high key and low key. I mean, I always find looking at other people's photography fascinating, and also then hearing about how they achieve those shots is just fantastic. So that gives you an idea of just what Donna achieves, and she does it very successfully. Not everyone's going to get it right first time. She's got this kind of magic formula with all the combinations of color and darkness that she uses while highlighting the one thing that she wants. When it comes to low key, the point is that you want to kind of accentuate the shadows more than the highlights, whereas with high key, you are looking at really flaunting the highlights. You want as little shadow as possible. There was a free short Donna course on the Nikon site last week. Fantastic. That's brilliant. Yeah, I went to the Nikon owner one, the Zoom one. But I know that she works with Nikon School, so that's really good, Nick, that you mentioned that. So do check that out if you want some inspiration on how to set up things like that. If you've got someone who's a bit of a culinary whiz in the house who maybe does some baking and you want to take some nice food photos, definitely worth checking out her advice for things like that. Then I'm going to give you some very brief, you know, my own kind of experience. I don't have any food shots on this computer. I was looking for them earlier. I do have some from I used to shoot recipes for a magazine quite a long time ago, but those shots are on a very old hard drive. I couldn't find them, so I thought I'll show you Donna's even better. So Drazen just finished his like, yes, I'm sorry, I'm going to make you hungry again with those. They're fantastic, makes everything look amazing. So high key, lots of light, big windows, maybe a bit of fill flash or fill light potentially, always slightly overexposed. One thing to bear in mind is if you don't want to clip your highlights, you inevitably will if you're shooting high key, and it's not a problem. It's like that's the whole point really. But if you don't want to, then shoot slightly underexposed or correct exposure, and then bring everything up in post-processing. Just increase your brilliance and raise those shadows up, and I mean, depending on what you want to do with the highlights, it's personal preference, but you can even increase those or drop those. Just they're all sliders. They even have those sliders in apps like iPhoto, the equivalent Photos now, which is the Apple thing, and in the whatever the free Windows one is. But if you've got Photoshop or Lightroom or Affinity or Luminaire or any of those, they will allow you to do that. Some of them even have preset filters, so you can plonk on a filter and it will make everything look high key and amazing. Now, low key, underexposed, usually quite fast shutter speeds, smallish apertures depending on what you're doing. I mean, Donna on her course mentioned that she tends to use about 5.6 to f8, especially when doing kind of pointing downwards or flat lays as she called them. So when you're pointing down onto the subject and you have taller and shorter objects, you want everything to be in focus. Whereas if you're doing a side-on shot, it's quite nice to use a smaller aperture. If you're pointing downwards, you want to use, wider aperture. If you're pointing downwards, you want to use a smaller aperture to make sure that everything is in focus. So you might have smallish apertures for a low-key shot. Now, don't think that you need to have a flash in order to do this stuff, because I have successfully used things like candlelight for low-key. You can even use house lamps and have, for example, a house lamp on one side, properly diffused. Use your diffusers and then white sheet. Doesn't have to be baking parchment, it could be a white sheet or some white linen or something just to diffuse the light, and then you could have candlelight on the other side. It will play havoc with your white balance, so you do have to take manual white balance readings, and in order to do that, it is best to have something like a grey card ideally, or a neutral white. If you've got Lightroom or Photoshop, it will allow you to pick a neutral white as your white balance reference, so you can do that in post. But if you like to shoot it in camera with the correct white balance setting, or you're not shooting raw, for example, then do a manual white balance reading. Slightly different on the Z to the D850, but the concept is the same. You set it into the pre-setting, PRE, and then it will give you a choice of 1 to, I think, 5, possibly more white balance settings. And then you point it at the object, the neutral grey area object, press OK, or take a shot. If it's in the D850, press OK on the Zs. And then it tells you whether or not the white balance reading was good or not good. It's literally as simple as that. So do manual white balance if you're not shooting in RAW. If you're shooting in RAW, you can just edit it afterwards. That's perfectly acceptable. I am not judging either way. I don't edit my pictures very much, but as I've said before, that it's whatever makes the picture for you. That's the important thing. So I've shown you some high key and low key shots. Now, just to talk about props very quickly, I've got lots of pictures of books, obviously. You're gonna be like, why does she keep showing me pictures of books? But I wanted to show you props that you can use to kind of make a picture what it is. Now, you know, whether or not you like using props or not is another matter. But if you are doing still life, you might want to use props. So these are all shots from my Bookstagram. This is a very subtle plug for my books. It's not subtle at all. These are my books. And I actually took a high key and a low key version of this shot. I like this one better, but a lot of people like the low key version. But things like candles, teapots, cups of tea, jugs, fairy lights are fantastic props because they do give you this. I mean, on a high key shot, it's less noticeable. On a low key shot, you get this lovely kind of just improvised bouquet, if you like, because you're focusing on the thing over here. Everything that's over here goes nice and out of focus. The fairy lights themselves don't produce any light, so to speak. This was lit entirely through a big window right behind my bed there. Now, this is also window lighting and then using a load of plants as shots. This next one is slightly more extreme. This literally has every prop that has to do with this book series that I could find, including a mug and a candle and the fairy lights and a bowl of ice cream. I mean, you name it, it went in there, and the poster and everything. But this just gives you an idea of a setup. You could really go extreme. You could bring in all kinds of elements to make a still life shot. Candles and throws and cushions are fantastic. I tend to use candles and plants quite a lot. Here is just really simple setup, kitchen table setup with 3 candles and a succulent. And then here is the great outdoors again. This is just holding a book in front of a firethorn bush and shooting it straight out of the camera, and it just provided a really nice contrasty looking background, and that's what I went for. I've just noticed some of the shots for my next bit are down here, so I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I'm just going to switch over and segue very elegantly into my next topic. So those are props. Another thing that you can use is things like fruit. Sorry, I've just realized I'm out of focus for some reason. This is the problem. This is why I get shiny, is because I have to be really close to the camera. I don't know. It needs to readjust itself. Anyway, if I'm slightly out of focus, that's fine too. So plants make nice props. Yes, they do, John. They do, absolutely. I use succulents and orchids and anything really as props. Fairy lights are fantastic. I actually brought along, I have a jar of fairy lights. Sometimes masonry jars are fantastic for props because you can use them in the background, whether it's food photography or something else. Masonry jars, jugs, antique kind of cutlery, teaspoons and things like that. If you are, one thing that Donna mentioned, which I found really interesting, was having a variety of different shapes and sizes of plates, and also handling reflections by having sort of like antique-y silverware, which then doesn't reflect your face back in the spoon, for example, or the fork or whatever. Because if everything is quite shiny, then you do get a reflection. And I remember I was doing a shoot in a kitchen of just desserts, and every single serving spoon that they had would show me in the picture. So then after the shoot, I had to go and edit myself out of all of the reflections. So if you've got the stuff lurking around at home, if your silverware hasn't been polished recently, that's a good thing. You can use it as an excellent prop to just kind of jazz up a little bit your food photography or whatever the still life is that you want to do. Things like pears and apples, they're great as well, and really easy to come by. So you can create quite interesting displays that way. Thank you, Ed. Yes, shan't let my head get too big. Yeah, life is interesting. I do a lot. And I do write books as well, and post about books that I read. So if you're a fellow book enthusiast, funnily enough, I was actually in the shop yesterday and Sam was with me, socially distanced, but said, "Oh, tomorrow's stream you could just talk about books all day." I almost am, but not quite. So anyway, I'm not going to talk about books anymore, but if you are interested, you can always go onto Instagram. I will talk to you about books without any shame or no holds barred at all. All right, so let's talk about backgrounds. I've talked about outdoor backgrounds and props that you can use. Rustic kitchen tables are fantastic. My kitchen table is far too modern for my liking. It's an IKEA one and it needs to be worn down a bit so that it has that rustic look. But apart from just, yes, thank you, David. Thanks for reminding me. You can get a dulling spray to combat reflections. If you want to spray stuff that is reflecting too much, you can get around it that way. That is a very good tip. In terms of sort of artificial backgrounds, let's say, you can buy, and I found a place, let me find it. Yes, there's quite a few websites like Pexels and Pixabay and things like that, where you can actually download backgrounds for free, and then you can print them yourself as long as you're not using them commercially. So with Pexels, you can literally use them for whatever you like. With Pixabay, you do have to not use them for commercial use, but things like this, rustic backgrounds, are fantastic. Now Donna, I'm just going to keep talking about her because she's great, actually mentioned that she has some backgrounds printed out and quite large. You can get them printed from places like Vistaprint and stuff. So if you do want to buy, you can also buy backgrounds like this from places like Etsy, which is a craft sort of marketplace website, and they vary in price, but depending on what you buy and where you get them from and whether it's made of wood or plastic or it's just a bit of canvas, you can find things like this quite easily, and they are very good. My pictures of jugs and what have you, which I think I've now closed, but anyway, the backdrops are all just a dark blanket, but you could use something like that. Also, if you are somewhat artistically inclined, I haven't had time to do this myself and I've been meaning to for a long time, but if you are kind of artsy or you have canvases, you can paint your own backdrop. I have big canvases that I keep meaning to paint my own. One of them I want to use for a backdrop, but you can absolutely do that. And depending on whether or not you want the backdrop flat and then the table surface to be a different surface, if you want it that way, you can just have an already mounted canvas. You can buy canvases if you're feeling artsy, and why not at this time when we can't really do very much other than be indoors. Places like Hobbycraft and CasArt, you can buy canvases relatively inexpensively, and then some acrylic paint, dark-ish colours, and you can paint up your own backdrop, and then you've got it forever. And if you do want that kind of continuous look where the back and the base or the portion that's underneath your subject is the same tone, so it almost looks like your subject is kind of suspended, if you want that look, then you do need to have loose canvas that you can pin up. But if you are using a tabletop, for example, and then you want a different backdrop behind, you can just get a mounted canvas, super cheap, depending on the size that you get, and paint one up yourself. There's some actually really good tutorials available on YouTube as well. I will do one of these days if I can. If I get time this weekend, I'll try and do mine, and I'll show you my results. But you know, not everybody can afford an Oliphant backdrop, which are the most beautifully and exquisitely hand-painted backdrops. We can't all buy one of those, so why not make one ourselves, right? So that's that's another option apart from printing off your own, or getting one sent to you from someone like on Etsy, for example. The other quite neat, I'm going to say neat, it's a bit of a cheat, I think. I don't know. You can decide. Is using iPad backgrounds. Now, obviously, that has limited usefulness, but let me just give you an idea. So here is an iPad. Let me just get it to recognize my face. There we go. No, it didn't recognize my face. Of course it didn't. So by downloading something like that, that's actually, there's some green in there, so it's disappearing in the green screen. But having something like that propped behind your subject, and then not having it lit from the front so you don't get glare, and obviously having the lock screen timer turned off so it doesn't keep turning itself off all the time, you can get some very interesting photos. So I downloaded some stock imagery that I then used for that, which is what I'm going to show you next once I find it. Yes, okay, good. I wanted to just give you an idea of, that's that backdrop. Now, I was shooting in pitch black, so I had no light source here. This was late at night when it finally does get dark. And just having, you could, if I didn't tell you that it was an iPad, you might not know. So you could just think that it is a fancy light source. The other thing that I use quite a lot is mirrors. So obviously there is a mirror down here so that you've got the reflection. Mirrors are fantastic. Just the bathroom mirror is fine if you can take it off the wall. Here's another example of one that I did. This one didn't come out quite as bright as I wanted it to, but I tried it with both the 850 and the Z6, and I struggled with both cameras to get the shot that I wanted perfectly. But this was just a little trick. This is actually water with food coloring in it. I don't actually drink wine, but I wanted the reflection of the wine written in the bottom of the glass and also that sort of neon sign. So I just looked for neon signage, I should say. This one is probably my favorite for obvious reasons. And this was actually neon signage, a shop front, if you like, with the neon signage, and it's a picture on my iPad, then reflected in the mirror. You've got you actually can't see that it's reflected all the way down here, but then I've got the little espresso cup on the saucer. That's all iPadography, if that's a thing. It's all iPad backdrop. And actually with this one I had a candle over here and a candle over here just to pick out those little highlights that I wanted here. With this one I also used a candle, which you can see are reflected here, which was slightly annoying, and it didn't provide me quite as much illumination as I wanted. But when you're shooting glass, reflections are can either be your best friend or your worst enemy. So with these ones it was a matter of just working out what was going to work. For this it was just backlit by the iPad, and to be honest I'm very satisfied with those shots. I mean, obviously they're all very low-key. With this one I whacked on some vignetting afterwards because I wanted it to be super low-key. I'm not sure what this light source is. I think maybe it's from the room behind my dining room, and it just leaked through. But with this one everything was pitch black and it just worked out really well. So there's some artificial backgrounds for you, and as I say, you may think maybe it's cheating using using an iPad. I don't think it is. Also, you can use an iPad or an iPhone as a light source. If you're doing longish exposures, you can move a phone light or a flashlight torch, well diffused, around a subject to get an even light. So there's a few other things that you can use as light sources there. I do have a couple of other bits that I want to run through with you, but I'm just going to check the old comments quickly because I knew that someone was going to say something. Photography books, yes. Used flags. Plain canvas for artwork available from any good artist supplies outlet. Make an excellent base for a self-painted background. That is what I'm going to do this weekend. It's my crafts project, Simon. I have lots of canvases. I haven't picked up the paints in a while, but I think I would like to paint my own background, so I will do that. Yeah, anything... that's actually really interesting what Simon mentions there. Taking pictures of sort of rustic backgrounds and then using them yourself to print off is a fantastic idea. I mean, I was just grabbing things from free stock image websites, but you can absolutely do that, particularly if you want to get it printed large. If you're somewhere where you know, old rustic barn doors, as Simon says, or wood that has been a little bit worn, things like that, you can then get those images sent to a place like Vista Print or Solo Press or First Point Print, something like that. They're all printers. They'll all print those kind of backdrops for you, and you can have them as big and small as you like. If you don't have, say, like an A1 printer, you can do it that way. So that's a really, really good tip. Ian says he's used an offcut of vinyl floor covering as a backdrop. There you go. And also canvas sacks and things like that. All of that stuff. I'm becoming quite a hoarder, I've noticed. So it seemed to be keeping things and going, yes, that's going to be very useful as a backdrop. And when you look at the stuff that, for example, Donna has collected on her website, I was just looking through all the things. She does have rustic boards that she uses as backdrops, but she's also got quite a few linen cloths and things that she adds into the mix to kind of give it texture and light and leading lines and stuff. And it's all really, really nice. So have a little play. All right, so now I'm going to just talk very briefly about some homemade DIY flash hacks, let's call them. So Thaddeus or Nick, someone was mentioning earlier that Nick on School did a DIY light box out of Amazon boxes, which is fantastic because I was going to do a similar thing, but I did some other hacks as well. But that is a brilliant way if you want to create a light box for product photography. You quite literally just need a cardboard box that you can cut out the sides, tops, bottom, everything except for the back, basically. And then you would need a large sheet of white paper or vinyl or something that is thick enough that you can then pin it and it will stay. And then just some see-through cloth. So semi-transparent cloth, white, that you can put on the sides and the top usually. And then the light sources can pretty much be anything at that point. You've got two lights shining from the inside. You might want a flash on the front and you've got your homemade light box. Honestly, it probably costs about £5 to make one of those. Or you can buy one on Amazon for about 40 quid. So it's choice is yours. Now, in terms of other cardboard box, light boxes, etc., you can also create a kind of cardboard snoot that you put on the front. I was trying to find a picture of it. I found one in Amateur Photographer magazine, but the picture was so tiny that it wasn't going to demonstrate what I was talking about. But essentially, you take your speed light, you've got a cardboard box, let's say an Amazon box, sure, we're all doing lots of shopping on Amazon, and you've got all three sides covered, except the inside is lined with aluminium foil, and then the front can be lined with baking parchment. It will produce a slightly yellow light, but then what happens is the light travels through that, much like when you it's a softbox, when you stick a flash into a softbox, it's the same concept. But you can put it in the side, or you can cut out a flash-shaped hole to put in the back, and then you've got a softbox. Cardboard, tin foil, and baking parchment. My Blue Peter badge is officially earned. I never got one as a kid. I was absolutely outraged. So I think I've achieved that Blue Peter badge level as an adult now. Another thing that you can do, and I've used this quite a lot for event photography actually. There is a chap, I'm going to switch over to his website now because I thought you'd find it more useful. Neil van Neerkerk, I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly. I found this through someone on the, if you know Felix Kunz, who is he's a lot of things actually. He's an Oliphant representative, a Rotolite ambassador, and he's worked with Annie Leibovitz and a whole bunch of other people. Anyway, he has a Facebook group that I'm a part of called Felix's Lighting Challenge, and someone recommended this to me when I was doing an event and I was really struggling to find an appropriate flag. Basically, it flags the light. So someone said, have you used the black foamy thing? And sent me a link. So after that, I did use a black foamy thing. It's quite literally a piece of black foam and a hairband, or an elastic band, or whatever you want. I mean, he says 2 hairbands here, and it goes under the flash so that it bounces the flash. There's a whole video, so if you want want it, I can put it in there for you. But it just flags the light so you don't get these harsh kind of glaring looks. I'm going to show you another alternative to the black foamy thing. But I thought that this would be quite useful if you do have any sort of black foam just lying around. And I've used this with success, so I thought, why not? It costs about 50p if you've got hairbands already. If you don't have hairbands, it might cost you £2.50. Now, the other thing that you can make, that I made, mine fell apart before I got a chance to bring it to today's class, is a homemade beauty dish. Now, mine fell apart because I didn't have an aluminium dish. You can make the dish as big or as small as you like, but essentially it goes over the front of your flash like that, and then you just whack a bit of foil in the middle. There's a couple of examples and I have them. I'm just going to show you this. This is a beauty dish shot with a $200 dish. This is a shot taken with a whatever $2 dish, so probably about the same. If you're very careful with yours, it might work. This was another example that someone uploaded to one of the sites, which was aluminium dish with a sort of white yogurt pot over the front. You have to hold it in place with toothpicks or something like that. And then here's one with a styrofoam plate. Same concept. Beauty dishes are jolly expensive. So I don't possess one, but I did create something very similar to this. What I ended up doing was cutting out some cardboard and then putting the aluminium all over it except for the hole in the middle, and then just having suspended in front a panel of aluminium in front. And depending on what I was doing, I got varying results, but I didn't get the hair in the headlamps look that I normally get with the kids. I mean, this was actually probably my favorite. I know he looks very sulky. He hates having his picture taken. Poor Damon. But just the evenness of the light and the fact that it was a low-key black and white shot, the beauty dish, or my homemade aluminium beauty dish, did just what I wanted it to do for that. This is actually, this next one here is using the baking parchment as a diffuser on my flash, and just the subdued tones, which I will talk about momentarily. But anyway, so if you're feeling like a dab hand with the arts and crafts this weekend, then why not make an aluminium beauty dish? If you've got a turkey baster tray thing, you can make a massive one. If you've got a little tray, then make a small one and see how you get on. But it actually works really, really well just to get rid of and even out those lights. Here is the expensive version one. Oh, it's the ad's gone now. But it's very expensive. They are about £200. So why not make one for a couple of pounds, if that, and give it a whirl. Now, just to show you, let me just show you. This is a Fong. This is a Gary Fong diffuser that normally goes on the front of my flashes. In that turkey baster beauty dish tutorial, they actually whacked this into the middle of it. So the shape of the flash as a cutout, and then this in the middle of it, and then he put the bit of tin foil, that's what I was trying to say, aluminium foil, over the front of this, rather than using this thing, which is the diffuser. So you could do that, but actually I didn't use that for mine. I cut out from a cereal box, of course, a beauty dish kind of shape with a flash cutout hole in it, and then I molded the aluminium foil around it. I mean, that's kind of the beauty with this stuff, is that you can mold it and shape it however you want. So those two shots that I showed you of my youngest looking very serious and unimpressed, the first one was with the light actually flattened, and then the second one was with the beauty dish curled over so that the light actually focused much more on his face rather than kind of flattening things out. And then the last thing that I did was I took my sheet of baking parchment, and with my SB, this is an SB 900, I think it was the 900 that I used, I quite literally taped it over the front, just a bit of duct tape, top and bottom, and created that lovely kind of antique-y, sepia-looking still life that I was going for. I took some shots in black and white of that still life, wasn't totally feeling it. With the flash, just way too much glare, and to be honest, even with this diffuser, which is the one that Nikon supply, it was still too much because the white jug was reflecting that white source of light quite hard. Even when I was pointing it upwards, I was getting reflections that I didn't like. So the baking parchment kind of spread the light all the way around, and it also gave me, because I fiddled with the white balance a little bit, I did a manual white balance setting rather than a I did a custom one, let's say, rather than a manual reading. And I got that lovely kind of sepia look, which I liked. And that was kind of what I was going for. I wanted an antique-y looking thing. So there you go. All right, so I'm going to look at the comments very quickly. So I have a large piece of black velvet, which I leave scrunched up so there are no seams. Excellent. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. I have an old one from Maplin. It has blue, white and grey backgrounds. Yeah, Terry, that box, which comes with all these different backgrounds. You don't even need to make one yourself out of an Amazon box. So there you go. I was going to talk about Quality Street Wrappers, Baxter. That's great. So yes. Quality street wrappers. I don't have any. We're on a chocolate fast. It's very sad. But Quality Street or Roses or any of those which have that kind of gel-like quality, I mean flash gel, not like jelly gel, quality, you can actually use those as coloured lights. I, many moons ago, another craft project, I guess, made one of multicoloured lights and then put it in front of the flash and did some portraiture with it. And I kind of got this almost stained glass window effect on the face, which was kind of interesting. So you can use things like that. Try a Pringle tin with the end missing as a snoot for the end, I'm guessing, David, as a kind of softbox effect. That would be very clever. Becky, with this light modifier, is this similar to the Gary Fong snoots? Yes. Yes, exactly. Snoot filled with black plastic straws. Directed spotlight. Very clever. Ah, see, I love how everybody's like, I did this. I tried this one and this works. I have to try the dish for macro. Yeah, the dish is very clever, actually. And just the way that it spreads out the light is really interesting. I've never used a beauty dish because the cost of them just made my eyes water. And I thought, it's not something I'm going to use that often. But actually, just making one yourself and putting it to the test, why not? Tesco cheesecake, plastic base with foil and gaffer tape work okay as well. Yes, exactly. I should have a Gold Blue Peter badge, David. Thank you. And I think that's an excellent excuse for buying cheesecake. I shall have to buy some cheesecake on my next shop so that I have that. Yeah, I don't get any Blue Peter points for the beauty dish that fell apart, just because I took it on and off the flash quite a few times and I needed duct tape probably to hold it in place. But if I buy a cheesecake and wrap it in foil and then put it on the flash, that'll probably do the trick. Anyway, so the last thing that I wanted to mention, and this is just as a mention more than anything else, if you don't have a speed light, but you're a bit of a dab hand at, let's say, home improvements, you might have one of those large halogen lamps that you use to light up kind of workplaces. My husband used to have them. He was a carpenter for a long time and used to have them when he was working late. So halogen lamps like that, you have to be a bit careful because they can get hot. But that produces a lovely light if you hold a sheet over it for portraiture. So if you've got any of those kicking around, you can experiment with those as well. Old desk lamp shades like the industrial lights, you could probably put those and use them as a kind of mod on the front of a flash for sure. Like once you've worked out how to fix it, if you put some duct tape, this is the solution. Duct tape is the solution to all problems, I think. Then that could certainly work as well. I mean, with all these things, it's kind of about where you direct the light, how you use the light, and basically so that you're not a victim of the light, but you're actually using it to make the shot that you want and to have lots of fun, because it can be tremendous amounts of fun. I have to say the most fun I had was using the iPad backgrounds. I got the results that I wasn't expecting from those, because I thought, well, I don't have fancy schmancy backdrops here at home, so let's try and download some and see what happens. And I'd seen an article someone had written about, using an iPad as a backlight, and I thought, oh, you could combine the two and maybe have that. And that was probably my favourite set of shots from all of the experiments I did. But by all means, do have a little play with these. I wonder if there's any, I'm just going to have a look at any of the links that need to go. Oh, look. Fatina's put my Instagram in there. I'm going to put Donna Cruz's website into the stream chat so that you can I'm even if you've just eaten lunch. I think that that's worth having a look at. And if there's any other links that you want or things that I talked about that you think, oh, could you pop a link in there, let me know. Otherwise, just drop me an email and that's fine. I can send them to you. But hopefully, with those in mind, you can have a lot of fun this weekend. I'm sure that I'm going to get some very funny emails on Monday. Don't stick anything to anything that shouldn't be stuck to it. Don't glue yourself to your flash gun or anything like that. But do have a play. If you're feeling artsy and you've got access to acrylic paint or any kind of paint where you can make up your own background, even white paint with just a hint of grey or a kind of antique-y brown in there, burnt sienna or something, will produce a nice background. So if you've got anything like that or you want to source those, please do let me know what your results are. I would love to see them. I had a lot of fun refreshing my mind with the Drive folder when I was looking for high key and low key examples, and a whole bunch of extra shots that I hadn't actually seen were on there as well. So you can upload them to the Drive or you can send them to me, whatever you like, but I welcome them. There was an article with Donna in Enphoto recently. Yeah, she's everywhere. She is fantastic, and she's a wonderful public speaker as well. She's really very down to earth and makes things very easy to understand. So whether your food photography level is beginner or intermediate, or, you know, like me, maybe you've done some before and then you've kind of neglected it and come back to it later, she's great, and she will tell you just what she does. There's no kind of secrets. It's more about finding the right balance and finding what's pleasing to you. So there you go. Working lights that use LED are better. Yeah. Okay, now we're talking about DIY lights. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to be helpful with that. But yeah, do be careful with those DIY lights. The ones that aren't LED are very hot, the halogen ones. But if you've got the LED ones, then use a white sheet to diffuse. You could use baking parchment, but don't use paper near the halogen lamps. Again, hot, right? I think I've pretty much given you all the warnings and provisos that I can possibly give you. So the next thing for you to do is go out and experiment. Thank you, David. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody for all of your contributions today. Thank you for your photos and for your ideas and tips. It's been fantastic. I hope that over this weekend you get a chance. I mean, the weather's going to be glorious, so you might not want to be indoors making your own backdrop. You might want to be out there, but which is also fine. But if you do get a chance to take any shots and you upload them to the Drive folder, just let me know. I would love to see them and see how you got on. And I will see you next Tuesday for another stream, hopefully. No, I will see you next Tuesday for another stream. We are working out how that's gonna work. If you have, I've got a gold badge. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend and rest of your Thursday and Friday, everybody, and I will see you next week.